So, what will happen in the future with the SEC? When will we get to a 9 game schedule? Will all these games that are getting played right now happen when they're happening? Well, we got a little bit of insight into that on Wednesday when Chris Del Conte, now, if you don't know who that is, he's the athletic director at Texas, was meeting with some constituents there, and he had this to say about the future of SEC scheduling. He says we have 8 games scheduled right now, talking about 2024. We're working on going to a 9 game schedule, but we have a ways to go with that. I would say this year we have an 8 game schedule. The following year, 2025, we have another 8 game schedule. Then we'll look at going to a 9 game conference schedule. So I've got a lot to say about this because usually ads are pretty quiet about this sort of stuff. But he's new to the league, and that may be one reason why he's saying what he's saying. He also talked about how, Texas's preference is to play the Red River rivalry at 3:30 Eastern, which I think is going to start happening this year, and that not only do they want to play Texas A&M every single year, but they want to play them on Thursday. I'm assuming Thursday of Thanksgiving. So there's a lot to talk about here. First of all, when you talk about a 9 game schedule, you cannot talk about a 9 game schedule without more revenue. I'm just going to tell you like it is. I mean, I know that as powerful and as great as the SEC's been, and Greg Sankey has been is really the best athletic director. Excuse me, is the best commissioner in conference athletic in college sports, but that's not really saying much. He's the oldest one and has the best league and all this stuff. As good as he is, I mean, I'm not sure how he's going to get Disney to pay them more money. I study this a lot, probably more than anybody that covers the SEC. And there was a time when I felt like the SEC would get more money from Disney for another game. I'm not sure that that's going to be the case now. I don't know Greg Sankey. I've not interviewed him or anything like that, but he has been pretty clear in speaking when I've been there during interviews. What I'm saying, I haven't interviewed him one-on-one, but what I'm saying is that he's been pretty clear that they'd like to go to a 9 game schedule, and from what I recall, they don't necessarily need more money to do that. I'm not sure that's going to be the case. I mean, I think that if you are creating more value for Disney, they're going to pay you more. The question is how much more, and are they in a position to do that? There's a lot of moving parts here. So that Del Conte said what he said, I don't know what a 9 game schedule would mean for Georgia. Georgia's one of the few schools that has more than one rival in the conference. I don't know if can South Carolina really say that? Can Arkansas say that? And when I mean a rival, I mean the other school views you as a rival as well. Like South Carolina, I think they view Georgia as a rival. South Carolina is not one of Georgia's rivals. They're a team that Georgia plays every year until 2024. Are Tennessee and South Carolina rivals? No, they're not. I mean, everybody on your schedule can't be a rival. What I'm talking about is Bama, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Florida, I guess, LSU and Bama. There's going to be particular games, Texas OU, A&M, Texas. If you go to a 9 game schedule, are you going to protect Tennessee, Alabama, or is that game going to go away? Because Alabama can't play everybody. So we've hit it all at once here. We've got the 12 game playoff now. We're settling in on ESPN and Disney being the broadcaster of that. That makes the most sense. They already got the contract. Essentially, they created the thing, so that makes sense. Now you've got a 12 game playoff. You've got more losses that your teams can lose. That your teams can digest. A 9 game schedule. Obviously, everybody's going to lose a game. You can still win the national championship. You can still get multiple teams. It may help the SEC in that regard. So we're gonna see what happens in 2026. But like I got all these games on my block over here. This is a scholarship block. This is the future schedules and all this stuff, which has just been a disaster. Like Georgia's supposed to play Florida State. Georgia's supposed to play Clemson, Ohio State. And all that. They're not playing them if they're playing a 9-game SEC schedule. They're just not going to because the 10th game is going to be Georgia Tech, and that's a rivalry game. That game's going to be protected. Period. Georgia's going to play Georgia Tech every year until the world ends, unless there's a pandemic. But it might be that Tech and Georgia open the season against each other. It could be that in the future, that Georgia plays Tennessee to close the schedule. And that is completely possible in a 9-game situation. So what I'm saying is, like Georgia, Florida, I don't think that's ever going to get moved. There's too much money involved. There's too much tradition involved. There's too much of all of that. I don't think Georgia Tech's going to get moved, by the way. But Georgia, Florida's not opening the season. I can tell you that right now. Georgia, Tennessee actually has opened the season in the past. No. Was it Carolina? Well, it was the first 2 games, one of the first 2 games. I think they played Tennessee in the second game for a long time. Just before Kirby got to Georgia. That was not an abnormal thing. I think in 92, that was the second game, and it might have been the second game for a while. But anyway, Tennessee was usually an early game, and then we kind of settled into the traditional SEC East schedule for a while, and that broke up here at the end. But a 9-game schedule for Georgia very well could protect Georgia, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, Georgia Tech. Those games are going to be played until the world explodes. Georgia, Florida specifically, that game is going to be played. If college football is getting played, Georgia, Florida is getting played, period. It's just that's happening. So Georgia Tech is like 99.95555%. Georgia, Auburn's probably like 95%. But I think these are the scenarios. Like, it is not out of the realm of possibility that Georgia, Auburn don't play in 25. I'm not sure I buy that, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. That game is just too big for everyone involved. It's just too important a game, and it matters too much. It wouldn't be the equivalent of LSU or Alabama not playing. It's its own thing. I mean, like, it is a top 10 game in terms of viewership over the last 12 seasons of college football, and they're not going to get rid of that. And the whole point is to get people to watch so you can create more advertising revenue so that you can pay this massive $350-ish million, whatever it is, contract to the SEC's schools. So the 9-game from Del Conte, I mean, they're clearly looking at that and going to move forward with that at some point. I just wonder how they're going to extract more revenue from Disney, a company that has shed revenue over time. One thing to pay attention to here is what's going to happen with the rights for the NBA. We've got everything settled for a while. The NBA is coming up here pretty quick. NASCAR's done. The NFL is done, which is the most important one. The NBA is the second most. But in the period of time here lately, the NBA and Disney have been in the same bed together for coming on 2 decades now. So if those rights could be very expensive. All of these live sports are worth it in terms of revenue typically, but you don't have a Pac-12 to deal with anymore. That's gone. But that doesn't mean that the payouts necessarily went down. So there's all sorts of stuff like Paramount, which CBS owns Paramount. They had a bunch of layoffs today. Disney media has become a very choppy thing, but sports on television, that is like the golden egg. That is the goose. There's a bunch of geese that are laying these golden eggs, and the SEC, all it is entertainment, and that's it. And that's what Disney views it as. And Paramount missed out on that. CBS, that's gone. That ship has sailed, and we don't know what the future will look like in 2036. That is hard to know. That's when the SEC's contract is gone. So from Disney, but that ain't never going to end because they own a network together. So getting to 9, that's one more home game every other year. In theory, one more conference game. A lot of places aren't like Georgia, y'all, where all the games are sold out. South Carolina might not be super eager about losing another game, but they might want another sellout where they can charge $150 a ticket for the Alabama game. Right now in 2024, for instance. Now let me just pull up South Carolina's schedule to prove my point here. Everybody's not Georgia, but everybody has the same vote that Georgia has. And that's the part to not forget here. I mean, Mississippi State, South Carolina, Florida. These are schools that do not sell out. Here's Carolina's home schedule. Old Dominion, that game will not sell out. LSU, that game will probably sell out. Akron, that game will not sell out. God, Texas A&M, that game will not sell out, I don't think. Missouri, that won't sell out. Definitely Wofford will not sell out. They might sell out 2 of those 6 games. That's it. They traditionally, South Carolina, they sell out 2 games in a 2-year period. And like, you can count on it, is what I'm saying. Clemson, Georgia, those are knock it dead. You're going to sell the stadium out. All the other games, all bets are off. I mean, I think even if they played North Carolina, that might not be a sellout. Missouri, they're thinking the same thing. Mississippi State, they're thinking the same thing. Tennessee, the ticket, all that's going to matter too. So the more you play big games at home, the more it helps you. I mean, so there is some other stuff involved here, but I do not mean it bad. Greg Sankey is definitely in control of a lot of stuff in college football, but he's not a magician. And they're gonna have to figure out how to build the bridge to 26. The Big Ten has already gotten everything in line. They are essentially owned by Fox in many ways, in a way that the SEC is not with Disney, which is a whole nother discussion for another time, very nuanced. But the Big Ten essentially knows where it's going for the next 4 years with scheduling. The SEC doesn't. The SEC can't quite agree on it. I think that, Georgia wanted the 9. I can't remember the schools. Georgia was one of them. I think Mizzou was one of them. But there are a lot of schools that were a no. Georgia's going to want to play the Gators, Auburn, and Tech every year. And if they get that, they're going to be full force ahead. They're going to want the 9 games. Because the other thing, too, to keep in mind, there's only so many home games every year. That Georgia and Florida play on a neutral means that you're losing a home game every other year. The beginning of seasons against Clemson or North Carolina or Virginia or whoever, or Oregon at the Dome, that's not a home game. I mean, you're getting a payout, but that's not a home game. So, all the complaining from Kirby about recruiting, you don't get that in Atlanta. He doesn't complain about Atlanta recruiting as much as he does Jacksonville, but Jacksonville ain't going away because of the revenue from it, okay? So, all of this is in consideration, but this is really a Greg Sankey and Bob Iger. Bob Iger runs Disney. This is a Greg Sankey, Bob Iger kind of situation. And, in my opinion, and I say this as a Disney stockholder too, there is value in live sports. I just don't know how much value there is for Disney to give the SEC more money for that game. And I don't know what the reason that the SEC would do it without more money. I mean, I don't think they will, it doesn't make so much great sense. And as a good negotiator as Greg Sankey has been and is, I don't think he's just going to roll over for anybody. So it's complicated. We'll see how it goes. I mean, I do think they're going to get to 9 games. I'm wondering how they extract the extra money from Disney.